Diamond pottery dates back to the 12th century. This sentence is extremely important as it helps me respond to the question. You can see that they refer to the pottery and describe it as being valuable. So being valuable definitely makes it important, so that's one point. Another point that I can mention is that the pottery dates back to the 12th century, which means that this pottery is probably very historic. So I can use this as a second point to respond to my question for why the pottery is so important. You could also say that the pottery was very rare, and that also makes it important. So you have three possible options for this question, but you only need to mention two of them in order to gain the mark for question number one. Now let's take a look at question number two. Question number two asks us to provide one word from the first paragraph, which tells you that Mr. King found the pottery by accident. Notice that the question only asks you to provide one word, so if you respond with a phrase or a sentence, you'll end up losing the mark. Remember to always follow instructions in any assessment. Let's take a look at the text. If you look at this sentence here, this chance discovery is being hailed as one of the great undersea treasure finds. They refer to this discovery as a chance discovery. The word chance indicates that when Mr. Kim found the pottery, he found it by accident. So this is our response for question number two. For question number three, they're asking us to look at the phrase, another day at the office, lines 6 to 7. What does this phrase suggest about Mr. Kim? In order to respond to this question, we do need to go back to the text, find the sentence that they are referring to, and then try to explain it, or try to ask ourselves what we understood from it. So this is the sentence that they're referring to. It starts from the extraordinary up until the office. The extraordinary discovery took place on what was. Notice that it's placed between inverted commas, which indicates that this phrase probably means something a little bit different than the literal meaning of the phrase in between inverted commas. When you want to respond to questions that ask you to tick one box, one technique that you could use is to determine which of the responses are definitely wrong so that you can cross them out and then determine between the options that you have limited yourselves to. For this specific question, we're going to cross out Mr. Kim was in the office, and we're going to cross out Mr. Kim is not satisfied with his job as if they're clearly wrong. Another day at the office in this specific context indicates that Mr. Kim expected to have a normal working day. He did not expect to find this valuable pottery. So this is going to be our response for question number 3. Now let's take a look at question number 4. Before we move on to question number 4, we need to look at part B. Why does the writer, or why has the writer put this phrase in inverted commas? Why do we usually use inverted commas? We usually use inverted commas when we are about to mention something that was said by a character in a story. But this isn't a story. If you go back to the text, you'll notice that this wasn't said by anyone specific. The reason that the writer placed it in between inverted commas is because the writer is using someone else's words. When you want to use someone else's words in your writing, you place them between inverted commas. Another reason could be because the writer is using an idiom or a very common phrase that's used commonly between people. So the writer placed it between inverted commas. But the most obvious response to a question like this is to say that the writer used the phrase in between inverted commas because the writer was using someone else's words, not their own words. Another option that you could use when responding to this question specifically is to say that it doesn't mean what it says literally. The writer doesn't literally mean that it was another day at the office because Mr. Kim is a fisherman. He doesn't really work in the office. His regular work day is spent on boat. So these are the 3 possible answers for part B. So as you can see, it's common in past papers or it's common in checkpoint reading exams to be asked about punctuation that is used by the writer and to comment on why the writer chose this specific punctuation. Now let's look at question number 5. In question number 5, you're asked to explain in your own words the meaning of each of the following as it's used in the text. I'm going to show you the answers for these 3 questions. The word oblivious means to be unaware of something. So your answer should have a similar meaning. Here are some synonyms that you can use. If you mention a synonym in a question like this, you definitely get a mark for explaining the meaning of the word. The word examine is kind of a simple vocabulary word, so I believe that most of you will probably have been able to respond to this question. To examine something is to investigate it or to look very closely or carefully at it. So your answers for this question, for these two parts, should satisfy the meanings practically. Let's look at question number 6. Question number 6 is going to require a little bit more effort from us. In question number 6, we're asked to explain 2 ways in which the opening sentence of this text tries to gain the reader's attention. So you're commenting on the techniques that were used by the writer in this question. Notice that it says to support each explanation with a different word or phrase from the opening sentence. So whatever your answer is, whatever the technique is that you choose to comment on, you need to support your answer with a quotation from the passage, from the text. Otherwise, you do not gain all the marks. This question has 4 marks on it. So obviously, if you were to determine how your marks are going to be divided or split up, or how they're going to be, let's say, distributed, you have 2 points. You have 1 mark for the point that you mentioned, and then another mark for giving evidence. Same thing goes for your second point. 1 mark for the point that you mentioned, another mark for the piece of evidence that you provide. Let's read the question one more time. We're explaining 2 ways in which the opening sentence tries to gain the reader's attention. Let's take a look at the opening sentence together. This is my opening sentence. Let me highlight it more clearly for us to take a good look at it. So this is my opening sentence, and this is what I'm going to refer to when responding to the question. My opening sentence starts by saying, this story combines all the great mysteries and exciting discoveries of the sea. When the writer uses the word story, they capture the reader's attention by making them more intrigued to learn about what happened. When you use the word story, you make something seem more intriguing or more appealing for a reader. If you look closely at the sentence, you'll notice that the writer uses words such as mystery and exciting. These 2 words make the reader very curious to learn more about the text, to learn more about what's going to happen or what story the writer is referring to. So when you make the reader curious about something, you do gain their attention, you do gain their interest. The writer also uses words such as discoveries, which makes the writer feel like there is going to be some sort of adventure or exploration in the text, which makes the reader want to know more. Let's see. We also have the words